What's cracking? I'm Nick Danger, and you're now tuned into the Art of MV. Welcome to my channel, and thanks for watching my video. Do me a favor, hit that thumbs up on the way in. Engage in the comment section and leave all the good, the bad, and the ugly there for episode 2, or Cliff Note 2 of the Art of MV, with the Roland MV series. We're going to call this one Speaking Rolandese, right? And we're going to hit a little bit on the different levels of sequencing on specifically the MV as well. So let's get it. Roland sequencers kind of get a bad rap, right? They are quirky, they are weird, they're just different. But I think all of them are different. I really don't hear about the Octatrack guys complaining that the Octatrack doesn't work like the MPC. You know, they just do their thing. But that just got me to thinking about speaking Rolandese, right? So what is Rolandese? Basically, if you've used several pieces of Roland gear, you may notice that their best features find their way into all the gear, right? You can understand that when you're using an MV in particular, being well versed in Rolandese comes in really handy, because the MV does have a little bit of SP8. As a matter of fact, it has a lot of bit of SP808 in the DNA. It also has the VS series hard disk recorders written literally in the DNA, as well as the 7 or the S series multi-sample engine in here in its DNA, and in its physical hardware components as well, because it shares the same converters with the older heavy-duty samplers, as well as the premium inputs that they put on here. People don't talk about that as much, but that's true also. This is the same for the VerseLab MV-1 as well. It has everything written in the DNA. The vast differences between the sequencer, and I want to get into this in a little bit, with the MV-1 VerseLab as opposed to the Roland 8000, is that with the VerseLab, Roland went back to their style sequencing, based it around a TR step style sequencer. The sequencer on the MV-8000 is different from any other Roland sequencer. It is not actually a Roland sequencer. It is a Roland sequencer collaboration between Roland and another company that we don't know. I wish I could do some research, y'all. Maybe I should do some research to find out who, but whoever their Roger Lynn wasn't around to replicate, to make that MV-9000 you guys are wishing for. However, this makes the MV probably the only flagship or powerful workstation or synthesizer or unit that they made that in actuality is not a typical Roland sequencer. So while Roland gets a lot of flack for their menu diving and their quirkiness of their linear style sequencers, the MV-8000 is kind of outside of that conversation, even though it's always included. So let me give you a rundown. First of all, when the DAWs came out, we got similar workflows like this, like the piano roll and the piano roll edit. This is a popular thing. This is a popular feature in most DAWs, right? As well as this drum grid editor. Same thing, very popular in most DAWs. Now, case in point, the VerseLab MV-1, Roland went back to leaning on their TR recorder, TR Rec style step sequencer to record, as well as have given you access to a real time where you could tap in your beats the way you do on an MPC. It's just not the same as an MPC. That has to be clear, but it's clear that they're leaning on their original sequencing pattern, minus the linear part. I'm talking about this part, the TR style step sequencer is what they're leaning on. In addition to that, they've kind of went with the clip bass launching. Now, that's not new either. That's also on the MV-8000 over here. If I pull up if I go into pattern mode, and I go to the pattern list, I go into pad banks, right? This represents different patterns. These are all different patterns. All these, see, all the ones that are grayed out are different patterns or clips, right? Same thing. It's the same concept. That's why going from this mode with the patterns and the clips, over here, the patterns are considered sections, right? And you can affect different clips within a section. So it's the same thing. The concepts are very, very, very interchangeable. And that's why I say that the sequencers are not that different. The vast difference between this sequencer and this sequencer is that this is not a Roland thing. This is a very Roland thing, and that is the difference. Now, not that this one is bad, because I dig the sequencer on the MV-1 Verse Lab the more I get into it, but it's not this, and this gives you a lot of options. MV-8000 3.5 and the MV-8800 1.1 update are superior sequencing environments to their MPC counterparts. The MPC counterpart to the 8000 and 8800 was the MPC 4000 and the MPC 2500. Those were the competitors for this, and if you ask me, this is a far superior sequencer than both of those. So I constantly hear this. This is a great place to pick up about the Roland sequencer, right? What we have here is the linear grid that you see on most Roland sequencers. The Phantom series look just like this, only on a smaller screen, minus maybe these things up here, all these control nodes that you see up here, right here. Everything that you see here is what Roland is about, right? So these are all MIDI notes and MIDI ticks. Down here, if I come down to this track, you'll see that I'm on MIDI B3, so that is the second keyboard input, the third MIDI channel. So in addition to the 16 internal MIDI channels, if I pull up the mixer, you'll see these are the internal parts, 1 through 8, then 9 through 16. In addition to these MIDI parts, there's A and B, 1 through 16. There's even a guy who, just put something on MV Nation, or I think the MV official Facebook page, where there's an R-Bus workaround that has a third MIDI output, which I'd love to have that. And the reason I mention this is because Roland sequencers are always misunderstood. So I gotta admit, it's different, but like I've mentioned before, I don't see the Octatrack guys trying to turn the Octatrack into an MPC or into a TR style sequencer. So let me get these back to get along a little beat here, man, right? So I want to show you two similarities between both MVs, and I'll use this particular project that's going right here to describe it, right? So looking up here, you can see this bar. This yellow bar represents audio that has been recorded onto the hard drive in the VS recording style sequencer, right? Inside the hard disk recorder, right? Everything underneath this is a MIDI note, either MIDI signal where the sound is actually coming into on the keyboard, or an internal MIDI like these, the drums, keys, and stuff that are MIDI 1 through 8 inside the MV, correct? All right, now what you hear in the pads and the synthesizers that are going on in this particular composition is a combination of the recorded track up here, which is a sample. I've sampled the incoming synthesizer and pads with a certain effect on it and made a take lane of it, right? And then you hear the signal still playing through the inputs on the MV-8000. All right. Now, if I was to open this screen up here and go into mixdown mode here, if I was to go into mixdown mode, I would be recording everything you hear, including the incoming synthesizers, not just the recorded take lane that I've already recorded into the internal hard drive of the MV, but the incoming signal and whatever effect I had on the inputs would be recorded onto the MV. But if this was the MV-1 Verse Lab, this would represent 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tracks of MIDI. Then we'll just say this will be an instrument or the vocal take lane recorded up here in 16 different parts. You can do 16 different takes, but it's all on the same track, right? Now you can adjust the clips. That's another story. You can adjust the clips, but it'll be all like this, all in one take lane. In addition to all this, if I had a sample, say coming from maybe the SP555, I got a loop that I'm actually using over in the MV. It will be coming in the input. It'll be MIDI triggered by the MV-1 Verse Lab, and that sound would be playing through the inputs of the Verse Lab MV-1 as well as what's in the vocal take lane, right? That is a striking similarity to this, what we look, because it would work out the exact same way. As a matter of fact, if you have the digital download of the manual, they have a picture of it and it looks just like that, right? So those are the two reasons that they are conceptually they are the same. So here we have a perfect example of the 3 different environments that you actually control when you're talking about the MV-8000 8800 recording technology from the early 2000s. And actually had to access with the VGA monitor, because everybody didn't have that. Sometimes you could use the screen. But if you had the VGA monitor with those hard disk recorders, you'll be familiar with these bars. These bars are just audio. There are 2 different versions of audio. The yellow version up here is actually at the top are actually audio recordings. That's literally instruments coming in here, right? Whereas this white down here are audio patterns, basically clips, like sections in the MV-1 Verse Lab. These can be triggered by hitting a pad, just like 1 section, 2 section, be 1 pattern, 2 pattern, and those patterns have their own actual audio track. Let me show you. Go to the mixer, go over here. They have their own audio phrase track right here. This is where this white would come up at in the mix, right? So you have a pattern sequencer built within the linear sequencer, and on top of that you have an audio recording environment up to 8 tracks that have the same treatment as the internal tracks, internal MIDI tracks, which is a 3-band EQ and a global reverb and delay send, all within this MIDI environment down here. Let me see, go right here. All this is MIDI. Now some of this MIDI is incoming sound. So mind you, these are the MIDI notes, but the actual sound will be incoming on the inputs on the MV-8000, which will be in mixdown mode, right? And all this is controlled within the same sequencer, right? So audio phrase sequencing, MIDI data sequencing, as well as live recording with punch in and punch out. Especially if you got a foot switch, you can easily punch in and punch out parts, which means you can loop 4 bars and continue to play the same guitar part until you get it. That's what I was mentioning to you guys earlier about learning to program keyboards. If you don't know how to play keys, loop that whole 8 bars and just play and just punch in and punch out until you catch what you want. That is the beauty of the MV-8000 3.5.1 sequence. From the 404 to the MC101, the 707, to the Phantom, all of Roland gears suffer from one drawback as far as users are concerned, and that is the workflow, what I like to refer to as the creative flow. Roland's a bit quirky. Now, For the 404, it's reasonable. When you buy a 404, you know what you're really buying. You're not really buying a beat machine, right? You're buying a creative sampler that you can make beats with, right? Now, when you buy the MC-101 and 707, you are clearly buying groove boxes, something to perform and sound design with. When you buy the Roland Phantom now, which is not classified as a workstation, you are buying a synthesizer with a sequencer on it, right? But it's really leaning towards synthesis, sound design, and more keyboardist kind of feature, right? No longer is it a studio workstation or workhorse. That's not what it is anymore. But with the MV-1 Verse Lab, they concentrated on the sequencer and songwriting abilities, right? They gave it some weird limitations, like the fact that you can only do 8-bar loops. That's weird to me, right? You got to constantly do 8 and stack them into 16 and so forth and so forth and so forth, right? That might be weird. They limited you to 7 tracks, right? But it's kind of deceptive because it's not actually 7 tracks, and there's a lot to that. But other than that, this is probably the best sequencer that they released, right? And why? Well, because of its simplicity and because of the way you can quickly get in and get out with your ideas.